Well, welcome to this first video in a series of videos on gross anatomy of domestic animals. And so I'm up on the top of the screen. I think you can see the red laser pointer. Sometimes the pointers disappear for some reason, but we'll see. So I call this gross anatomy of domestic animals. I'm not sure how many videos we're going to end up producing, but it's going to be quite a few, I think. Here's some alternative names I could have used. Basic gross anatomy of domestic animals. I'm not doing advanced, I'm doing basic, so I'm trying to aim this at somebody that hasn't had a formal course in gross anatomy for sure. Or just you could be a beginner or you can know some things, and I'm sure I'll tell you some things you don't know. Another name I could have wrote down, macroscopic anatomy of domestic animals. This series will be on what you can see with the naked eye. I could have also put basic in front of here. Basic macroscopic anatomy of domestic animals. I'm going to tell you a little bit later about what I'm thinking of domestic animals. And another name, Introduction to Gross Anatomy of Domestic Animals. I'm hoping I make my point that it's not an advanced advanced presentation of anatomy. No, it's going to be for beginners and maybe people that are halfway to experts. Okay, so here's my list of domestic animals. I will be talking about maybe some other animals sometimes, I'm not sure, but obviously we're going to do horses, cattle, swine, hogs, pigs, whatever you want to call those guys, sheep, goats, dogs, cats, and then I'll say rabbits. I didn't forget poultry, but then poultry, I'm going to use these guys sparingly because they're not mammals. Everybody else on that list is a mammal, and they have a lot more things in common than poultry. I mean, oh my gosh, there's so many things you can say about poultry that are different than all those other animals. I will talk about some poultry, but not extensively. So if you're looking for poultry anatomy to the nth degree, that's not here. Okay, so let's say you have a book that's called, let's say, Pathology of Domestic Animals. It could have been Anatomy of Domestic Animals. I want to show you what some authors consider domestic animals, and it's not a unified list. But here in the description of this book, they're going to have emphasis on cattle and small ruminants. Well, you know a cow is a ruminant, and then small ruminants, they're going to be referring to sheep and goats, I'm sure. Then there's swine, horses, dogs, and cats. That's what's in this book. And notice they don't have anything about poultry because that would be another long thing to get into. And then finally, I want to show you what I saw somebody put together, pets versus domestic animals. And the lines are really blurred because here they're saying pets are companions for the household members. Yes, dogs, snakes, lizards, and cats. But there's a lot of horses that are pets, so you could put pets in here. The smaller animals at least dwell in the household sometimes. A farm dog can be outside. I thought this was interesting. Can infect owners with diseases due to the direct contact. Well, that might be true. Zoonotic diseases pass from animals to people and so forth. We do love our animals that are pets. But the domestic animals, I'm not sure if I'm totally comfortable with their list because they're recreational and economic. They have cows, chickens, goats, horses, and donkeys. Yes, and of course they left out pigs. They're not making an extensive list here. Not usually in the household, right? Except, if dogs are a domestic animal, there's no doubt about it. So dogs and cats could be listed here. So it gets blurry. Rarely infect owners because of a rare contact, but I wish they didn't use rarely because my gosh, I got ringworm from a cow. People have gotten rabies from rabid horses. Obviously that's a big mistake and so forth. But I just thought that list was very interesting to talk about pets versus domestic animals. The next point I want to get across is that the animals that we'll be talking about are bilaterally symmetrical, or have bilateral symmetry, if I want to use that word up there. And although there's a lot of planes, and the anatomical planes are coming in the video immediately after this introduction, I do want to concentrate on the sagittal plane, and actually it looks like they're talking about a plane that divides an animal into a somewhat perfect left half. This is left over here, and on the other side is right. Well, then you would say mid-sagittal, M-I-D hyphen sagittal, to indicate that you are on that one plane that divides an animal as best you can into a left and right perfect halves, let's say. It's also called a medial plane, median plane. This will come later. But I just want to make sure you understand the terminology, that we're dealing with animals that are bilaterally symmetrical. Here's another little tidbit about it. All these little different images have something to say. Only one cut, and that's right. That's what I tried to say with that other image. Only one cut along the longitudinal axis will produce identical halves. At least, they're identical from the outside. You're never going to have identical left and right inside. Some organs are more on one side or the other. It's best for motility. In here they're saying the head region tends to be anterior terminology, then there's posterior. We're going to get into that when we do directional terms. I think that's going to be the video after the anatomical planes. Dorsal and ventral surfaces. This is dorsal, this is ventral. And then left and right, if this animal is facing this way, then this is the left side of the animal and the right side. And so that one anatomical plane, which we call the mid-sagittal plane, gives you a longitudinal section of the body. And I'm going to refer to a website where you can look at dogs this way, where they've cut a dog with this plane and you can look at inside. So bilaterally symmetrical. Another thing, just hounding on that, most land animals, and all the ones we're going to be talking about, like even poultry, they're bilaterally symmetrical. So you tend to get a mirror image if you go right down the middle. This puppy here is showing left and right halves, and I just want to make sure that if the animal is looking at us, then the left side of the animal is on the right side of the screen. Okay? So, and the right side of the animal is on the left side of the screen. So don't get that mixed up. Never put over here left. It's left in your vision, but it's not the left side of the animal. And the other point I want to make is, and I'll do this with anatomical planes, no matter if the puppy's laying down, upside down on its back, its left side is still left, its dorsal surface is still dorsal. So these terms are fixed. Like the dorsal surface doesn't change because of the orientation of the animal. So you got to make sure you understand that. And then, so I can bring in a bird, I just want to make sure we all understand. There's the left side of the bird. I'm not sure what bird that is, if it's a crow, raven, blackbird. I'm not a big bird person. Here's the right side of that bird. Okay, so now I'm still into terminology here, and the term I want to get across with this little brief discussion is that most of our animals that we're dealing with are quadrupeds. They have 4 feet. Of course, you know that poultry only have 2, so poultry aren't quadrupeds, but a lot of times you'll see that some statement in an anatomy book is these terms are can only be used on quadrupeds, for example. And I do want to make a point that some of the terms we use for quadrupeds do not apply to people. And at the end of the anatomical planes, the next video, I will show you some human planes, but just so you know that they're not the same. Okay, so here we've got 2 quadrupeds, happen to be both horses. If I remember correctly, I don't remember the number of hands, that this guy is tall, but he was the tallest horse at one time in the world, and this was the smallest horse at one time in the world. What's interesting between those two guys is that they have the same number of chromosomes, They are both hindgut fermenters, which means they have a cecum that can do roughage. All the same number of bones, obviously. Both some of the bones are bigger in the bigger horse, obviously, most of them. So there's two examples of quadrupeds. Dogs are also quadrupeds. And when we get to anatomical planes, and I'll make a point here, this is the dorsal surface of the animal. Even if he's laying down on his lateral surface, dorsal is still referring to this, although then it would be lower, of course. This is his ventral aspect. And even if he's upside down in space, you would say this is still his dorsal side, even if he's upside down. Okay, that's one thing you got to remember about these anatomical terms. And then, of course, I'm going to bring out a big turkey here because to show you that they are bilaterally symmetrical. And maybe I can even make him bigger, but I think you're convinced, could be convinced that you could find a line. In fact, he's even actually helped us here, although we don't have a perfect head-on view of him. You could find a plane that would divide him into basically a near perfect left half and a right half. But he's not a quadruped, right? He's got two, so maybe we could say a biped. But again, we're not going to do a lot of turkey stuff, a lot of poultry stuff, although we will include some. Now, I did want to plug my website, rodulrich.com, because it has a lot of things about anatomy and physiology, and I'm just going to show you some of the links here. This page goes quite extensively down, so it goes way, way, way down. But if you want to go to visit that website, there's stuff on other animals, and way down below there's many sites, but I want to show you that right now. So this is further down on the screen, and I want to bring your attention to canine planar anatomy. So you can see there's cat anatomy, there's all kinds of anatomy and physiology sites. That's mostly what I put on my web page. But I want to show you what this page looks like, because the next video, like I keep saying, is going to talk about anatomical planes. Man, have they done a bang-up job on showing you anatomy. I mean, it's a priceless thing. So here's one of the first pages you'll get to when you click that thing. You'll have animals divided by the three standard planes: the sagittal, the transverse, and I'm going to show you this one right here in the next plane, and then a dorsal plane, which we're going to also name as a frontal plane. But it's precious. These dogs have been sectioned, and I want to show you what I'm going to show you. I'm going to do a transverse in the abdominal cavity. So what that means is transverse is perpendicular to the long axis of the animal. And then on the picture I'm going to show you, the two pictures, it's going to be like sectioned here, and then we're going to look at that face. It's a cross section that's orientated, and then on the picture I'm going to show you, left is going to be on this side because that other side is the left, and this is the right side of the animal. Okay, so get ready for that. And here is a section, and you can see, I mean, you maybe not know it, may not know it. That's the spleen. Here's one kidney. Here's another. You might say they're different size. Well, kidneys are not perfectly across from each other, so this might be more the thicker part of that kidney, but this is more towards a pole. But then look what happens when I hit the show label thing. Look at the labels that they've put on that same image. There's the spleen, left kidney, right kidney. It's an incredible sight. Okay, and finally in this video I wanted to dedicate the series of videos on gross anatomy to my Uncle Glenn, who just recently crossed over to the other side. So he's raising wheat now in the great beyond. But this gentleman here, I always worked on my uncle's farm, where he taught me how to drive tractor, drive grain truck with a clutch and a shift on the floor, how to fix fence, how to handle cattle, how to work hard all day. So I dedicate these series of videos on gross anatomy to my dearly departed Uncle Glenn. Thank you, Glenn.